we have with us Mike from Sparkfund, Bhavna from Frontpoint, and Eric from ARC. And I think when we were picking up guests for this sort of our first event, when we were talking about future of work in HR, so we said, what is the ideal suite of professionals, leaders that we could pick? So company size, their prospective market, and few thoughts came into the mind. And when we pick up, and I think between Mike, Eric, and Bhavna, we are covering a wide slew of enterprise landscape. And they're all HR leaders, they're all doing fabulous job within their own circle. So thank you everyone for pitching in to help. So to start, Mike, maybe we can start from you. A brief introduction. What brought you to HR world, and just introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi everyone. I don't know if this is on. Great. So my name is Mike Kohn. I'm the Chief People Experience Officer at Sparkfund, which is a clean tech company. We're focused on outsourced energy management, all in the sustainability and environmental space. And I've been in HR my whole career. Was one of those wonderful strokes of luck where I found there was a great match between my personal passions for helping people find their interests, their directions, with putting together organizational macro trends. It turns out when you put those two things together, you can achieve a lot. So I've had a background in HR across professional services and architecture, in higher education, and now in this clean tech organization where I'm responsible for really everything that touches the experience of our people, from candidate to alumni and everything in between, all of your typical HR functions, as well as our office management, our IT, our events, our overall systems, and really all things day-to-day administration. Really excited to be here to chat with you all.
I'm Bhavna. I'm the Chief People Officer at Frontpoint Security. It's a home automation, home security organization. We're a mid-sized organization, brought in like other companies to rebuild their HR function, take them a little bit further in how they thought about their people processes as it tied to their business, to build out the HR function as well as grow the organization. I have tons of experience in human resources, like Mike, also studied it and got into it from day one. I love small and medium-sized organizations, organizations that are wanting to either transform their HR organization or the way they think about people and how they want to align their business strategy to their people strategy. So that's where I have most of my experience, is building and transforming HR organizations and companies.
Thanks. Eric Barger. I started as the head of HR for Airlines Reporting Corporation in late 2016. And as we've progressed as an organization, I've picked up some other duties: facilities team, employment law, corporate comm. And so in late 2018, moved into the chief administrative officer job for the organization, but very much kind of born and bred out of the HR space. Background in organizational psychology. Not necessarily sure I was going to go into a career in HR, but I wanted to impact organizations, saw it as just definitely something that was a clear-cut path to impact organizations with that background. First role was with Discovery Communications or Discovery Channel years and years ago, and it was just like a lot of turns in my career, just like pure raw luck getting in there. And so after that, got kind of energized with the field and haven't really looked back. So excited to be here today with this panel in particular, and just see if I can kind of hang with them and all the insights that they're going to provide and all the background. And so turn it back to you.
Awesome. So Eric, since you have the mic, you can go with you're the easy target for the next one. Yeah. So I think one thing that's fascinating about your background, and we were discussing that before this session as well, that you had worked with a very large organization and then moved to a slightly more focused one. So still a mid-size.
Yep.
So what are some of the things that you have picked, creating an organization and working with creating an HR for an organization with sort of pretty high scale and compared to the mid-size? What are some things that you picked you could share?
I'll try to take that on. So I like that wording of focused. So there is something really cool about small and mid-sized organizations in terms of your ability to really feel the organization and get a sense for how programs you roll out are going, how like beyond just an engagement survey, like what's really going on within the company. So I do love that about small and mid-sized organizations. I actually came from a huge organization, 85,000 people, to this mid-sized organization, and before that had some big sets of time at large global organizations. And I will say one of the hardest things moving to ARC, or Airlines Reporting Corporation, 3 years ago was, I'll call it like reverse scaling everything. Instead of like having millions of dollars to manage with talent acquisition budgets or L&D budgets, you now have a fraction of that. And so you do have, while you have the advantage of a smaller scale, less people to kind of wrangle and get your arms around, you also are challenged by the fact that you have less resources to go out and do that. But what we really focused on, and why I think I was tapped to head HR for this organization, is a lot of my background is in the talent management space, in particular building up good succession management practices. And so I've gone really deep in the organization at the request of the board and also at the request of the company to make sure we're doing the right kinds of things in that place to assess our talent, figure out how we're going to build for the future, figure out the development dollars and how to spend them best. And I feel like we've had really good returns on that, but you don't solve for all challenges of a company in 3 years, but I think we're trending in the right way.
Interesting. Bhavna, you're next. So one thing that's fascinating about your background, so Frontpoint, very high-tech, security, right? Very tech-focused, very up and beat and leading edge to the technology. What are some of the things that you have picked running in organizations HR for something that's very close to the technological evolution of staying ahead in that? Like, what are some of the things that you could share about what is helping you succeed in that role?
Sure. I have had a ton of experience actually in the technology world. I started out in healthcare IT and then moved to digital media and now at Frontpoint. And what I've noticed is in order to make things truly successful and kind of continue to build off the programs that we launch is to mimic the way engineers work. So what I mean by that is whenever I'm getting ready to launch a program or think about what this program is going to entail, I think about how do I simplify it? How do I make it easy for people to understand? And how do I make it so that we can iterate off of it easily and it's not so too ingrained where we can't change it on a dime? Because that's the one thing that I've noticed all throughout my career. No matter what program you put out there, if you just set it and forget it, it will never be impactful. So you have to constantly iterate off the program. And if you make it overly complicated, it's hard to do that. And so I've learned from my engineering counterparts and thought about, let's look at the programs that we're trying to launch. How can we simplify it? How can we constantly iterate on it based on the feedback that we're getting to make sure that it's always impactful? And that may mean one department launches it a certain way and another department launches it a different way. It doesn't have to be consistent across the whole entire organization, as long as the core of it remains the same.
Interesting. Wow, pretty cool. So, Mike, I think one thing I found fascinating about your background is, I think we talked on the phone that you were the first guy brought on board to create a people landscape in this company, right? So when you are at startup, you actually got to you get this front row seat in creating that sort of a very people-centric organization. Tell us your journey. Like, talk to us through your journey. Like, what are some of the things that you picked when you're designing your organizations to be a people-driven, a people-centric organization?
Yeah, sure. Great question. I feel like I've sort of made a career out of trying to transform HR from being that place where all things go to die to a place that is actually helpful, useful, advisory in terms of the way an organization can run, which I'm hearing echoed so far. So when I came into Sparkfund, I was the first people person that they had, and I still give the company a lot of credit for thinking at 30 people. It was a good idea to bring someone on board, but definitely got the sense of, we know why we brought you here, but we're not entirely sure what you're going to do, and so figure it out. And it was great to be able to create that people strategy effectively completely from scratch. To go out and do a listening tour at that size, you can talk to everybody that's on board, but the concept applies no matter how big you are. Get a pulse on what do people do? What is their jobs? What brought them to the company? What do they like? What do they not like? What are they expecting? And then also setting the expectation for what is this role and what can you expect out of me, and be able to be that bridge between leadership and the rest of the organization. Put together trends and figure out what do people looking for across the board? How does that line up with where leadership is? Start to build those pillars of trust, that sense of understanding on what does that vision look like and how do you communicate that holistically to entire company? And then sort of echoing what Bhavna just said, really build that roadmap like a technology organization would, to say, here's what's coming, here's my release plan. And then when things go awry, as I'm sure they will, be able to communicate, great, we're going to switch gears from there, and keep iterating on that over time and continue the conversations, continue developing that strategy from there.
Interesting. And since you have the mic, so one thing that that we can a kind of segue into this new segment. So since you're building your organizations with this idea of you're creating the people landscape in this company, and you're from HR background, so what is to you, what is the role of HR in the future of work? So what is your perspective when you design this? You see the role of HR going forward in the future. Like what would you say?
So I feel like this is probably echoed across the field, but at the end of the day, the people that work in a business are the most essential asset that are going to be delivering whatever it is in our space. So figuring out new ways of making sure that continues to be true and actually is a lived experience. So a lot of that work for me from a forefront perspective is stuff around data and technology, using that better. There's a lot of talk about AI these days in terms of how we're going to drive that forward, using things like surveys and all the tools out there for engagement, but also things like predictive analytics on who's going to be leaving the organization soon. How can we prevent that from happening, and all the things that are associated with that. And likewise, one of the other macro trends that I think is really important for us in our field, for organization, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I feel like that is something that we're talking a ton about, that people are struggling with because it's a difficult topic. Being able to be leaders and champions for that work, not just by talking about it, but actually leading efforts within an organization and transforming viewpoints, which is something that I think we have the power to do within the we have.
Interesting. So, by the way, before we get to Bhavna, so what is Sparkfund? I forgot to. Yeah.
Oh, sure. So Sparkfund is a clean tech company. We're based in DC, but we have a national footprint, and our work is all about clean tech. We are an outsourced energy systems management company. So, if you think about most businesses, they don't exist for the sake of managing the HVAC system or the lights in their facilities. We can help to do that better. So what we do is we'll take over all the old clunkers that you might have in your facility as a business, but we'll also install any new tech that you might need. We'll do the comprehensive asset management. We'll replace the new tech when we need to. All the while, we'll save energy, we'll save money, so it helps the planet and helps the business. And it takes off something that most businesses are not really interested in doing, and we let them focus on their core business.
Interesting. So Bhavna, question?
Yes. I don't know how big.
So my company is about 400.
We're about 50 people right now.
400 employees spread out. Corporate headquarters, Arlington, Clarendon Metro Stop, essentially, and then Tampa, San Juan, and Louisville, Kentucky.
So Bhavna, first about your company. What does Frontpoint do?
So we're home security and home automation. So, it's self-installed. So it's no one's dollars coming out to your house. It can grow with your lifestyle and your as your family grows. You can add on to your system, whether it's a doorbell camera or now a door window sensor to your daughter's room because you don't want her to sneak out. You can kind of make different evolutions to your security system. So it's kind of a new way of doing security.
I think sign me up. So, so from your perspective so what are the tenets of a good people organization? So
Sure.
what do you?
And if you don't mind, I'd love to add on to what Mike said a second ago.
Yes.
I also think, I think yes and to what Mike said in terms of the AI. HR's role, I believe, in this is also to help the organization transition. There are going to be a lot of roles that we need to upskill and that we need to think about what positions are going to be automated and drive through technology versus having a team there. So we need to help consult the business on what are the roles that we need people for, what are the roles that we need to automate, what are the things that we need to outsource, and kind of think through all of those pieces, in addition to all the things that we need to do from an HR perspective to help our own field.
Is there any thought about, so realizing the people that are going to be replaced, can you cross-function train them to stay within the organization?
Absolutely, that's
So
I think a
can
huge.
you repeat the question? So,
Sure.
please.
Her question was, can like the people that would potentially be replaced by technology, what do we do with them, right? And the idea, I think that is a huge part of our roles is to think about how do we upskill them? How do we train them for future roles? How do we train them to either be managers or leaders or other skills that you'll need within the organization? I do think that that's something we absolutely should be a part of.
Awesome. So, Eric, what does airline reporting corp do?
So Airlines Reporting Corporation sits at the intersection of all the travel agencies of the world and airlines of the world. And so we conduct settlement of the transaction last year in excess of $90 billion in transactions. We have a sister organization, which is IATA globally, that carries up, I won't get these revenue numbers right, but I think they move about 240 billion for the rest of the world. So it's interesting that how much, if you start to think about the US and 400 million people, it's actually fascinating to think how you compare those numbers.
Right.
But what drew me to the organization is that we're also a data and technology company, as my boss likes to say, a normal for-profit organization. We happen to have a board of directors that is comprised, even though we're privately held, board of directors that's comprised of a lot of major U.S. airlines, and so they provide us great guidance, great insights, and so they are owner airlines, but also in some ways customers. So it is a unique dynamic that sits there. So what we've done with the data that sits behind all those transactions and years of that data is started to create reporting, insights, and products that can help organizations and help everything from what we call OTAs, online travel agencies, like little shops like Expedia, straight through to little corporations like Microsoft, figure out how to spend the right way, how to focus the right way. And so it's exciting, and we've only been going down that road for a set of years of our existence, and it's interesting to see where we're going.
Beautiful. So I want your take on your perspective on what changes are you seeing in the talent acquisition space, as I think you have been either you call it watchdog or you are actually seeing organization at various levels. What are some of the things that you have pegged that is going on that we should keep an eye on?
So we as a company like with the big we're going through a digital transformation right now. We are transforming our entire technical stack, and at the same time, not just changing the technology, but we're shifting our way of working. We're standing up agile teams. We're calling it Arc Agile because apparently no one purely goes agile, but we believe like there's an Arc Agile that exists out there. We're going there as an organization, progressing all of that. So the future of work and the future of talent acquisition really does mimic that. So if you look at things that sadly I hadn't even heard about a set of years ago, we're being challenged to bring into the organization, test and learn, iterate, and continue to just kind of refine them and make sure that they work. I told you before we got started about the first time I touched like the concept of video-based interviewing. It was a disaster, and I ended up turning it off in the organization that I was in because we're trying to create what? Like a more streamlining, more efficiency within my team internally, but then a better candidate experience outside, and neither was happening. But these things keep evolving, and I happen to, through a group called GLG, look at the landscape of all the different firms that are doing this video interviewing work now, and it's dozens. It's pretty wild to see. I last year stood up a group internal to ARC, what we call action learning teams, and it was a set of people, no HR professionals, and I gave them the charge of modernize talent acquisition for us. Do whatever you want to do, dig up whatever you want, interview whoever you want, but I'm not going to give you the kind of the project plan. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Come back and say what you want to do. And they did some really neat things that kind of tightened up some of our processes, but they also said you need to do text to recruit. And they challenged us to invest some money to do text to recruit to help people, help us as an organization to better interact with their candidates, to stay on top of things for people who were candidates who wanted to opt into texting, that we could interact in that way. And it's been really neat to watch. We're not kind of at the end of that evaluation, but that's aspects of it. Like the technology of HR needs to evolve with the technology of an organization. So I've asked my organization to support a full HRIS change out because we're just not where we need to be with that. We recently put in iSIMS on applicant tracking system, and that's changed our game. That was about a year ago, and so that's really helped us to change. That was not an iSIMS commercial. I just wanted to know to state what we went to.
So pretty cool. So one question for everyone. Maybe you can circle on that. So what keeps you up at night regarding your job? So
I get that.
Not
Start.
It's actually from the audience that question of what about the workforce? As you look at the transformations within my organization, it's how to make the right type of investment in the people within the organization so that if there are aspects of skill sets that aren't going to be used in what we call future state, how can we get these people that we know are a cultural fit, that we know have the soft skills to succeed in our organization? How do we get them the technical skills or leadership skills, as Bhavna said, to succeed in the future of where we are as an organization? And that is, I'm hard-headed sometimes. I truly believe it's absolutely doable, but it's not like a fall out of bed, super easy solution. There needs to be a two-way street. They have to help you understand where they want to go, where they're willing to go, and then you have to go and find the programmatic solutions that meet that. And it's just not easy, so that does create a little bit of the stress. So I'll give it back to Bhavna.
Thank you for that time. So I thought of two things. One, I totally agree with the leadership skills aspect. I think we already struggle with that. Most people struggle with being a good leader and being a good manager. And I think that's just going to continue to get harder and harder. And people are going to be less focused on it. The second one is around the HR profession. I think it has taken us so long to get to this point. I don't want us to slip back and be 30 years behind where we need to be. So we need to stay ahead of it, and we need to make sure our profession doesn't get left behind. And they're able to keep up with organizations and the needs of the organizations ahead of when they actually need it. Because I think we're, as a profession, falling behind, and we've continued to fall. So that.
interesting.
To quote you, I'll say yes and to everything that was said so far. I think the thing I'll throw out there is from where I sit, really the blend of short-term priorities and long-term priorities, and trying to make sure that they're staying in balance. From a leadership position in organization, trying to balance both the close of the deal tomorrow, or the whatever the grant you are looking at, depending on your organization, whatever that need is tomorrow, with where are we going in the future. And for I think what our roles are within the organization, tomorrow is important, but we're sowing seeds that are going to be realized 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now. Leadership development, trying to drive cultural transformation, really setting up diversity, equity, and inclusion practices that are going to manifest in positive ways, and trying not to be distracted by whatever is happening in the short term or the long term. And I find this really across all organizations, both with the sales in my own company, or I sit on a board of a nonprofit called Foodworks, and we struggle with the same thing, with trying to work towards a 3-year vision while needing to accomplish our goals for tomorrow. So I think it's very much across the board.
So recently I'm obsessed with a lot, because I feel like HR spends so much time thinking about the beginning, and you have this amazing dinner at this gorgeous restaurant, and then the waiter's like, and that's how most of these offboarding experiences are. And to your point of the future, there's no focus on alumni because there's no immediate impact to the organization. But when you're thinking about brand, you're thinking about Glassdoor, and it's something that universities figured out 20 years ago. So what is your thinking in HR today? Is that something we're talking about? Do your leaders? I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
So if you can repeat the question.
To quickly paraphrase.
You might want to edit
To
that.
alums and not to
My
alums.
experience for people who have left the organization. It was a much better question than that. I'm sorry you weren't here to hear it. It's a really great question. I'll give you a couple of perspectives. For a company of 50 of our size right now, we have not had that many alumni that has just created a giant experience. But at the same time, we still talk about people and we don't just pretend they didn't exist. Oh, remember when so-and-so said something, and actually someone who has left the organization over a year ago, we say, remember when Natalie was saying that thing? That's still true. And we talk about them like they are real human beings. We invite them back for parties as it makes sense to do that. We engage them with that. But again, we're of that size. Where I came from at Deloitte Consulting, they have alumni programs and put on speakers. And I love the idea of that. So my short answer to your question is, we have not developed something because it hasn't made sense for our organization, but I think the idea of the boomerang, or however you want to refer to it, is real. But either way, people are people, and treating people like they are really essential components, no matter what, when they leave an organization is really important. It sends the message about how you value those people to everyone who is staying, and it really emphasizes that retention piece. And I think an alumni program that is slightly more formalized than the one I just mentioned really goes a long way to reinforce that value that.
So at my last company, Atlas, we did that really well, to be quite honest. When I started, it was about 30 employees. They had been around for a few years prior to me joining. And they had already started the alumni network. They actually laid off a group of employees shortly into their tenure, like any other startup, right? As they pivoted the business, and they stayed really close to that group of employees. And so as we went to go and scale, we tapped back into that marketplace, and that's where I saw the real benefit of it. I was actually just checking Slack earlier from that alumni group. We all stay in contact. We sold the business like 3 years ago to Oracle, and we all stay connected. We have events every now and then, but the day-to-day communication on Slack is just awesome. We utilize it to post jobs, to share information, just share insights to different things. We did an amazing job there. And I think it was the founding members of that organization that started it, and I definitely see the benefits. I haven't started it fully yet at this company, but that's definitely something on my radar, and I love it.
Yep. It's interesting you're obsessed with alumni. I like the way she said that. It's an opportunity. I started my day today with actually one of the returners, one of the boomerangs, right, to the organization. And I was like, what brought you back in? No, it was not a planted question. Like what brought you back in? And like I'd heard from him before, like some of the aspects. We have this thing we call TWIN, take what you need from vacation. So we have the unlimited vacation. We have a lot of other really strong cultural plays that like make people, when you step away from that, say, if you don't have all that replicated, you want to go back to that. So we started to address some challenges around offboarding, because I think you started to talk about offboarding, and like you have all these teams and all this concentrated effort on onboarding, but you better get the offboarding right, or you can forget about any of these alumni programs. We don't have anything formal within our organization from an alumni standpoint, but if members of this audience are obsessed with the concept, we better look at it.
So I think to add to that, I'm forgetting the name of the book, but there was a book they studied companies they're millennial, like they're more than 100 years, more than century companies, and one of the tenets of what they found why company exists. Whether there was technological downturns and up and down, right? It was a strong alumni network. So the culture, and IBM, GE, and a lot of these companies, that the name that came up, and when you talk to the workers, they pretty much are like family, right? So they are connected. So I think even the author on that, and I'll post the name of the book in the description as well. But fascinating read, and you are, I think. Thank you for being obsessed. I think it is why companies have been existing beyond all the technological downturns and depressions and all. So one interesting question for everyone, and then we can go to the Q&A as well. So when we talk to futurists who are from the HR side. So we see sort of two side of the conversation. So one bracket thinks HR is the gatekeeper of progress. There would be no HR going forward. They're just replaced by a software. And the other perspective is that HR is where there would be people. There would be sort of HR role would be lot more intuitive and inclusive, and it's the game is not over yet. And in fact, it's just beginning. What's each one of your take on that? Which side do you side, and then why?
So, I mean, I'm not sure that's a clean continuum, but I got you, and I think I can kind of like peg somewhere within there. So, I do not think that HR is evolving to some sort of like way of the dinosaurs. I don't see that. I don't see us replaced by machines. I think where we're definitely evolving is organizations aren't looking for HR for just like a pair of hands. There's just no doubt about that in my point of view and in my experience too. They are looking for strategic partners. The business is looking for strategic partners to bring the talent. Someone said it, like the most valuable, but also in most cases, most companies, the most expensive. The biggest spend, but also the most important asset for the organization is to bring it to life, to bring power to the organization and get the best talent. And at the end of the day, and the whole concept of talent wins, I think just keeps rising. One of the things I wanted to find some moment to say tonight is just, I do think that there's like really heavy rise of interpersonal skills and soft skills out there, even as all this automation goes. And I've reviewed some really deep survey work, and there's like 92% of heads of HR are saying it's as important as the technical skill aspect, which you'd hope, especially if you start thinking about leadership. But this is just more universally to jobs. And while 92% would say it's as important, 80% say it's rising. So it's only going to become more and more important. One of the airlines on our board of directors is Southwest Airlines, and they hire just for fit first. Right? They don't go at all the technical pieces. So and I don't know, but I don't see like an extinction point for HR. I see actually a rising importance. But I do want to echo what Bhavna said. If we don't stay current, that is a really good way to go the way of dinosaurs. So.
I'm in the same camp. I don't think that HR is going to be obsolete. I think there are going to be some jobs that go away, but there's always going to be employees. And I think it's going to be, if you think about the jobs that potentially will go away, it's going to start with the manual tasks or the easier tasks and the things so that employees can focus on the more value add type of work, the things that require problem solving and critical thinking. And anytime you have several people critically thinking or problem solving, there's conflict or there's more leadership skills that are needed to help guide those conversations. And HR has to be a part of developing that and making sure that we are good sounding boards and good consultants to the business as things arise, as leaders need more skills to help solve those problems and work together in a different way.
Interesting.
Sure, this is shocking. I agree. I guess from my vantage point, I think in my ideal universe, I am working my way towards obsolescence, to a world where managers are effectively managing their people, where leadership prioritizes all of this stuff, where culture runs itself. I think that's a ludicrous ideal to be working towards, but from what is my personal mission with the work that I do, it is striving for a sustainability environment, a self-sustaining focus where all of this stuff happens naturally, organically, and as part of the fabric. So I think in that sense, it's the same kind of answer. I think this is the kind of work that becomes essential as we grow, like they were saying here, that we're going to have more of these manual tasks that are replaced. We're going to have more of an emphasis on the soft skills, on emotional intelligence, and the underlying component parts here, and trying to work our way out of, and what's interesting is none of us have human resources in our titles. We all have something different, leaving the world of quote unquote personnel, probably leaving the world of human resources, moving into people operations, people experience, and I'm sure we're going to invent new terms for where we are going here that is really focused on that big picture strategic approach that is all about how do you really drive an organization forward through its people.
Well said. So with that, we can open it up to the Q&A. Yes, please.
So the resume that we is 130. I'm wondering how you feel about the resume. If there's some
So at the very least,
So if someone can repeat the question.
Yeah, I was going to try to. And so it's very well articulated, so I'll try to just do the best I can. So essentially that the resume is 500 plus years old, and what would you evolve it to if we had our druthers, and what would be the better solution? For me, that's a heck of a question, but for me, I think when I look internal to the organization, we talk about talent profiles. We talk about something much, much deeper than just that surface level set of words. Try to constrain yourself to 1 or 2 pages. We talk about like a depth of your experience, also your aspirations. You sometimes see some aspirations on resumes, but I want real depth. I want to know: do you want to lead people? Do you want to lead people in this avenue? To what extent do you want to develop these technical skills or these soft skills? I want that kind of insight. I also want to know kind of that crosswalk with how you're showing up at work. What is your manager seeing from you, kind of that other side to that profile, rather than this like static resume piece? Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, yes. I mean, that's one thing that's definitely evolving in. Very few organizations now are afraid of personality testing. Very few organizations are scared of data like they've never seen before. I think that to maybe give credit where credit's due, and it's not all the credit, but some of the things that Google put out there with, I think it's called work rules. Laszlo Bach, before he resigned to go do probably some amazing consulting somewhere, and actually I think he's standing up some other entities. Like they went out and said, like, it's way, people aren't that great at assessing other people, and so you better put some data in there or you're just throwing darts. They actually showed, I won't get this right, but they showed of many hundreds of hiring managers they looked at, that maybe like 2 were actually competent at it. So they said, we better put some data in there. So taking a black and white, static, 500 plus year old, potentially resume, and then going through a few somewhat structured interviews, I don't think is the way to find top talent. And I don't think it's the way to drive an organization forward. You've got to find the opportunity to put some data in there. And so that's all evolving. And so it's a heck of a question though. So who would like to take that?
You did a great job.
Yeah.
So I can add to it, by the way. So my company is focused in solving that problem, by the way. So we joke internally that this is how the workflow of recruiting works. So you ask someone to write their life on a document that they are not proficient in writing, and it's called resume. And then you ask a hiring manager to write in a very textual way what kind of talent they're looking for, which they are not proficient in. And then you put corporate jargons around it, and then you match these 2 guys together somehow using textual analytics. And then you say 3/4 of the workers are not satisfied in their job roles, right? So something has to do with so you are rightly picking up the point. And even like when our startup, which is in AI, when we started looking at the resumes and trying to figure out, it was ridiculous that how much we picked that the resume that we are seeing, they are sourced from like some other. So we did a wide database of resumes, and we tried to figure out which these resumes resembles with. So it's definitely not your resume in many ways that you're writing. Most of the resume that we find are not written by people who are represented by that resume. So then, is that right representation going forward? So it's a big problem. Well said. Yes.
So I wanted to get a bit of thought from you all
But bringing that in, well, what does that mean for you? I don't know that, not just HR, but just can you talk a bit about time?
Does anyone want to start?
I can start. Well, I think that's part. Oh, sorry. How do we get strategic leaders to think about the future of work, right? And start to look at the organization? Is that
And what would be like,
right? How do they dissect it? So I would say, this is just personally what I've done, and hopefully this is helpful. Anytime we have a strategy session when we're talking about the organization, whether it's when we're looking at second half of the year plans or 3-year plans down the road, that's the topic that us as I believe HR leaders should be bringing to the table is what are we doing to evolve our workforce? And does that mean upskilling, like we talked about? Does that mean automation? Does that mean outsourcing? What are the things that we need to do to evolve based on where we're trying to head? So I think that's part of what we have to do to consult the business leaders to make sure it's on the forefront of their mind. What are some of the things that we know are inherent in the team that they currently have? And then what are some of the things that we need the future to look like? And how do we bridge that gap? Do we upskill the current team? Do we replace it? And we have to bring those
I'm just thinking how to phrase this the right way, but we just spent the last 5 months working with Boston Consulting Group. So definitely like global powerhouse strategy consulting. And so much of what we're looking at is identification of skills where we are really strong, but also just more broadly competencies, knowledge, skills, ability, other characteristics, like where are we strong? But then likewise, what do we need to add? And so we put ourselves out there. We are a data and technology company. Are we really strong in data, in all aspects of data, right? From governance to analytics, et cetera, and just challenging ourselves to make sure that we are progressing in the right way. When we stood up the strategy and we started to think about structure, we also use those things as design criteria to think about how to structure the organization to chase after not just revenue, but also skills that we need to take the company forward. So that is a big question, and one that I hope that all HR leaders, but also business leaders are thinking about.
So I want to add to that as well. So our company, Tower.ai, so we monitor skills of people who are subscribing to our platforms, and we are monitoring their aspiration, experience, and expertise on that skill, right? So we're trying to figure out what skills you have, how much you like particular skill, how much you have worked in that skill, and how much your expertise is in that, confidence in that skill. And then that's a top public, right? So that's where we are. So 170,000 people are submitting the data, and we're learning from that, right? So now what we are learning, what are some of the trendy skills, right? What are some of the obsolete skills? And then sort of we started doing POCs with enterprise clients saying, okay, let us look in your skills database. Let us look into your skills cluster and see where do you lie when it comes to sort of what we are seeing from the public platforms. And we see that sort of wide gap. We see that gap where we say, okay, you are saying that your people are using this language or this particular aspect of skill. But in our public platform, we are seeing it's depleting in the trendy skills, right? And we're not alone. There are many sort of skill cataloging platforms out there that are emerging with us who are trying to help even businesses understand what does it really mean to be a sort of a skill of the future. And is there any neighboring skill that you could acquire today that certainly increase your sort of your capability of what value you can create for the company?
And I'll also add, I love the question. I think there's a lot of stuff here around how do we plan for the workforce of tomorrow, coming at it from a different lens with what's intersecting here. There's also a how do you plan for the culture of tomorrow that's going to be able to respond to whatever that strategy is. I think in any case, it's coming from what is the strategy and the vision that you are seeing. It all starts with that. How do you then build down from that? Are there things about your culture that need to evolve? Are you a meeting heavy culture, and with the direction you're heading, you need to change that that. Are you too siloed in some organizations? How do you build alignment? How do you build collaboration? Are your values pointing you in a direction that are antiquated and you need to reinforce that in a different way? It comes with that overall talent development, skills, abilities, but then there's the other half of how do you transform the organization so that it's ready to meet the objectives once you have them, and pairing those together to help align towards that overall strategy.
Awesome. So that concludes this session, and obviously we can hang around and we can chat. But thank you to the panel for sharing your insights, and I think your perspective is very, very critical for all of us to understand. And thank you so much for being very candid about it, for talking about it, and thank you to all the attendees for a wonderful set of questions. Thank you for showing up.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on the